Welcome back to 101 East. We're talking to Singapore's Finance Minister, Mr. Tharman, about how the global economic downturn is affecting this city-state. Minister, this economy has been suffering. It's been in decline now for 10 straight months. Do you feel a little bit responsible that maybe you should have seen this coming and done more to prevent it?
Well, everyone would like to say they should have seen it coming. Many of us knew that there were problems in the US financial system, to some extent globally. We all knew it would be disruptive, but frankly, no one actually predicted or expected the scale and severity of this crisis globally or even in the United States. So there are a lot of lessons that one can learn in retrospect, but I think it's not just finance ministers or central bankers or regulators who got this wrong. Everyone got it wrong. The markets got it wrong. So there are going to be a lot of lessons coming out of this, as there are in every crisis. What do we look out for? Each crisis will be different, but the basic lesson of not getting carried away in the boom years, paying attention to traditional regulatory precepts.
So what steps do you think should be taken now at this stage, from what you know now with hindsight, to avoid a recurrence in the future?
Well, I think overall leverage in the financial system, as well as the extent to which any one bank can leverage itself, are very simple, even if crude, indicators of what can go wrong. So these have been traditional ways of thinking, never allowing a banking system to overextend itself, never allowing a situation where a single bank can leverage on its equity 30, 40 times, which is what many of the investment banks did. These are fairly straightforward lessons.
But you knew that was happening at the time. Why wasn't the alarm raised then?
I think there were mistakes made, particularly in the US and some other financial centers that had global consequences. The fact that the markets were not self-correcting, even where risks were being taken in excess. They are now self-correcting, but with a crisis. But they were not self-correcting in the more efficient sense of the term, is something which we now have learnt lessons from, but could have been avoided. We could have had less of a purist belief in the self-correcting nature of the markets. So one doesn't need to veer to the other extreme of over-regulating the markets, of cramping competition. We just need to go back to what were tried and tested precepts that existed in banking and financial regulation. We can avoid the excesses that we've seen in the last 7 or 8 years, excesses which came from a particularly strong belief in the efficacy of free markets, excesses that came from specific decisions to deregulate where regulation had always been in place.
What about the working population? They tend to suffer a great deal in these situations. It could get worse for them. I mean, Singapore has never had a welfare state. Do you actually envisage a time when that is needed here?
I think we want to avoid that. There are other ways in which we can mitigate recessions and cycles than having to resort to institutionalized welfare, by which I mean a system of entitlement, where you automatically get assistance when you fall unemployed or when something happens. We do support our people. We support our people with very significant incentives for home ownership. We support our people through education and health. Our education system is well regarded for its ability to generate social mobility on a scale that most education systems in the advanced countries have been unable to do. It still emphasizes the role of individual effort and responsibility. It still emphasizes the role of the family to support each other, but it doesn't do away with the role of the state. So the state intervenes to build up capabilities and to help families help themselves. And that's a lot of work. It's a lot of work on the part of the state, but it doesn't assure you that I will protect you regardless of what happens.
But do you think the public has, a great deal of confidence in the Singapore government? We've seen this crisis that no one saw coming. People made mistakes. You've got Temaseks Holdings, for example, $38 billion in about 8 months it's lost. I mean, what is the confidence level of the people in the Singapore government now?
Well, I don't think the failure to see this crisis coming was a Singaporean trait. This was a global crisis, and I think you can look at every government, every stock market investor, every home investor, and make the same accusation. Everyone got it wrong, so let's be frank about it. We've had recessions. If you look at the last 10 years, we've had 3 recessions. Average growth rate has been about 5%. If you look at the last 5 years, including a very bad year last year, average growth rate 7%. So we're not doing too badly. You get hit when the global markets go down, but we're not doing too badly if you take it across the cycle and across more than one cycle. It's not a system that's working badly, and it's not a government that's governing badly.
But Temasek, $38 billion
Right.
in 8 months, I mean, that's a huge
So
loss.
Temasek's record is open for all to see. Has it done worse than the market? Evidently not, by any measure. If you look at any of the market indices, whether it's for private equity or the public markets, Temasek has not done worse than the market. In fact, by most measures, it's done a little better. More importantly, we do not, and it will be quite misleading for anyone to look at Temasek's record on a 6-monthly or 1-year basis. You've got to look at its record across the cycle. And Temasek has lost a part of the very substantial gains it made earlier on in the cycle. So has it underperformed an equivalent player? Has it underperformed the markets? Has it done so on a sustained basis? The answer is no. And those are facts that are published. They're clear for all to see.
Accountability on
And
this?
you could look at, I mean, let's look at the losses made by individual investors, by institutional investors. Everyone has lost a lot of money in the last year. Should you therefore avoid risk? Invest in government bonds and fixed deposits? Is that the solution? Is that the best way an endowment fund should conduct its affairs?
But I suppose there is accountability in all these
Yes.
companies. What about in Temasek Holdings?
Yeah, it's accountable to the government to produce results. It's been doing so rather well. It's had a creditable record by any standards. It publishes its results, which can be evaluated. So losing several $1 billion in 1 year doesn't mean it's got the wrong strategy. We look at their returns. We look at their ability to manage risk. So far, they're doing well, I must say. And this is not a defensive statement. This is just a statement of facts.
And just going back now, you are dependent on what happens globally, and especially in America, Europe, and Japan.
Right.
Are you at the camp of the President Obama that you spend your way out of recession, or are you the more cautious Europeans who like to wait and see?
Well, I think all countries have to engage in fiscal expansion as part of an international effort to mitigate the worst of this crisis. The fundamental problem is not one of government spending, it's one of a financial system. But the problems could be a lot worse for the financial system and our ability to get ourselves out of this hole if governments do not engage in some degree of fiscal expansion, and preferably a large degree of fiscal expansion. We have done our part. We are a small economy. We can't change the shape of world demand, but we've engaged in significant fiscal expansion as well.
And you emerged from the 1998 financial crisis quite well. You did very well in that. How does this crisis differ from that one?
This one is global. The other was largely an Asian financial crisis. This one is a lot deeper. And this one involves a far greater uncertainty because you're talking about the leading players in the global financial system being in a crisis of confidence. So I think coming out of this crisis will be a lot more complex, a lot more difficult, and a lot longer as a process compared to 1998.
Minister, thank you very much for talking to us. That's all we have time for this week from the 101 East team. Thank you very much for watching us.